little bit easier for others moving forward, right? Because there's a lot of unnecessary pain out there when it comes to autism and receiving supports and services. So it's, it's difficult to, I'm sorry. Is there any, just getting distracted with the people walking in and out. Yeah, I guess. Because, yeah, I can't. Thank you. Thank you, I appreciate it. This is my autism, right? This is little things like this really difficult for me. And it's hard because a lot of people don't understand how something maybe this little that might seem to other people is very difficult for me. But it hurts. My existence with autism was very painful for me because things like this happen on a daily basis, and they just completely throw me for a loop, and my executive functioning is immediately plummeted. So, I'm just kind of not sure what to do because, with autism, I'm very, structural, right? I'm very punctual. Everything is supposed to start on 10:30. I take things literally, right? And I know my growing pains that have that grain of salt, to really taste that grain of salt, so to speak. To remember to always have that salt with me because life happens. Life gets in the way. And, life irritates my autism, and my autism irritates my life. They don't necessarily, they're not too fond of each other. So it's difficult, and and I'm sorry. I shouldn't say sorry, but I'm frustrated that I can't be at my best right now because it's hard to think. Thank you. A little background about me, and I'm just going to kind of play this presentation by ear and kind of forget about the slides for now until I get more comfortable. So I was diagnosed with autism at age 12, and this is in the United States. After I was diagnosed, my life actually became more difficult because I was diagnosed 21 years ago. And in 2003, there was not nearly as much awareness about autism as there is now. So when I was 12, I was a completely different person. I was talking to somebody yesterday, telling him about how I was back when I was 12. And he looked at me and said, it's like you're describing another person, Russell, and it almost is. I've come such a long way in life that I feel like I'm a different person. But then every now and then, that little Russell comes out. It's like right now, right? That little Russell that struggled like that 24/7. Well, so the surface, and I remember I'm going to say that. But when I got diagnosed with autism, so I went from this kid who never made eye contact, who didn't talk to any strangers. I only talked to my parents and my sister. I did not talk to a stranger. And I would not look at anybody in the eye. If somebody was talking to me, I would be eyes on the ground, rigid body posture. So I was that kid at age 12, and then after 5 weeks in the psychiatric hospital for severe OCD, I was diagnosed with autism. And I went from that weird kid who wouldn't talk to anybody, who was in his own world, to now that weird autistic kid. And back in 2003, I kind of was confused abuse people even more, and stigmatize you even more. Autism, what does that even mean? So, that led to a lot of bullying and a lot of just misunderstanding by society, because again, there's a stigma around autism, right? Apparently you can see autism. I mean, I don't know if that's true or not, but every time I tell somebody I have autism, I get that way, oh, do you think you still have it? Do you think you ever had it in the first place? Because I can be very high functioning. And I'm starting to get into the group now and get more comfortable with being on stage and the unexpected change happening. And so, yeah, there's this large part of me that's very high functioning. But then there's a side of me that's incredibly low functioning. And those dramatic highs and lows are exhausting. So I became, again, more stigmatized, and that led to me not receiving any adequate support. We had an education plan due to my autism, but it was not adhered to by the teachers, and unfortunately I dropped out of public school in the 5th grade because it was too brutal for me. And so I withdrew from the world. I got hurt a lot as a kid. I was very sensitive, and I got hurt a lot, and so I withdrew from the world because I was struggling so much. And then I wasn't getting any support on top of that. And then on top of that, I was getting bullied and asked why I couldn't do this or do that, or Russell, stop doing that, start doing this. And once I dropped out of public school, I did have more peace of mind. But then I became very isolated. And I was basically a social recluse for 15 years. I'm 33 now, and in 2021, about 2.5 years ago, I became fully independent for the first time in my life. I moved to Los Angeles without knowing anybody. The prior 30 years of my life, I was attached to my mom's hip. Me and my mom were best friends. She was the only one who she was the only one I could almost count on. And she still is. And I miss her. It's hard being independent. But I know I have so much potential to give back. Even though the struggle is very real. So yeah, the last 2 years of my life I've been fully independent for the first time. And it's the first time in 20 years I've had friends. I didn't live out my teenage years, I didn't live out my 20s, I had no peer support growing up. I was alone. And so these last 2 years, while they've been incredibly fulfilling and rewarding, they've been a tremendous amount of growing pains. Tremendous amount. And I often wonder, should I move back in? Because when I go visit her, it just feels better. But at the same time, it's not fulfilling. I want to live alone, be independent. I want that personal life. I'm trying my best. And I apologize for being so emotional, but yeah, and I shouldn't apologize, right? I'm just an emotional guy, and that's one thing I'm learning in my independence, right, is to lean into who I am. I've had to fake who I am so often in my life, and I don't want to keep faking that, I don't want to keep faking who I am, so I shouldn't apologize. I'm sensitive, I'm fragile, I'm an emotional guy, and that is something that leads to some of my strongest strengths, right? I mean, this is the reason I can excel at the extraordinary but struggle at the simple. So 2 words have really been the theme of my life's accomplishments, because I have come so far, and those 2 words are passion and purpose for me. Passion and purpose. The Latin etymology behind the word passion means to suffer. It means to suffer. And I fully believe that through our suffering, we come upon our passions, because when we suffer, we become curious. When we're going through a difficult time in life, we ask why. Why me? Why am I going through this? Why do I deserve this? Why now? We're asking why. We're making an inquiry into our existence during difficult times. When we're having a great time, nobody's out hanging out with their friends on the weekend saying, guys, stop. Why is this happening right now? Okay? It's only when bad things are happening we say, why is this happening right now? Struggle and suffering makes us question. And in that, you can question what you're going to hold on to get through suffering. And we can hold on to our passions. And then once we come on our passions, if you nurture them, they turn into our purpose. And then through our purpose, we progress throughout life. Pain, passion, purpose, progress. The 4 P's. Thinking about writing a book called that, so nobody steal that. But I really like, I'm an open book. You know, in my isolation, I didn't have any peer pressure to be someone I wasn't, right? Like, again, I could be myself in my isolation. Not so much in LA, the last 2 years being fully independent. I've had to hide a lot of myself. But in my isolation, it was very liberating. So I talk about all sides of autism. Autism for me is my superpower, but it's also my kryptonite. It's my best friend, but it's my worst enemy, too. I have great admiration for it, and I have great frustration against it at times. But autism is how I have come so far. I mean, this is me around age 9, about 3 years before my autism diagnosis. And you can just tell by my body language that I'm just kind of zoning out, right? I think this was just on some holiday I'm at home. You know, I sucked my thumb until the age of 15 because that was really the only way I could calm myself down, you know? And I developed a severe speech impediment because I was sucking my thumb. I had very buck teeth. So at age 12, when I was diagnosed with autism, I had dropped out of public school. I lost contact with all of my friends. I had a severe speech impediment, and I wouldn't talk to anybody outside of my family. Last thing I thought I'd do would be a public speaker, right? And that contradiction is the theme of my life. Like I lived really well from the back of the room to the front of the room. Right? I went from being a patient at 3 different psych wards to now training hospitals on person-centered care. You know, my life is a walking contradiction. But again, if I can embrace the good and the bad, that, you know, they contradict each other, but that's life, right? It's not good or bad, it's both. And so I have come so far, you know, and you can just tell by my body language and the comparison of these 2 pictures that, you know, it is kind of like 2 different people. You know, I never dreamed I would be comfortable on a stage, but somehow, some way, being on the stage is where I am most comfortable. Thank you. But passion and purpose, you know, Friedrich Nietzsche, the German philosopher, he once said, "He who has a why can bear almost any how." He who has a why can bear almost any how. When we know our why, we hold on to it. It is our life preserver through the turbulent waters. So I'm a poet, and I do a lot of spoken word poetry. And this poem of mine is titled Dear Russell, and it is a letter to my young self of what to expect in life, of encouragement, of compassion. Dear Russell, you're going to go through some things in your life. You're going to go through some real tough things in your life. I know you're just a young boy now, but I want to speak up and warn you what's about to go down. Pretty soon, you're going to lose all of your friends. Pretty soon, you're going to see life through a different lens. This probably doesn't even make sense, but pretty soon, you're going to go insane and wish you were dead. I know you might be popular now, but pretty soon you're going to be laughed at by other kids who won't know how. You became such a pathetic wimp who's too scared to leave his house. Who's too scared to be in a crowd, who thought a whisper was so loud. But listen, you'll never be a wimp. You will never be weak. You'll grow up to be stronger than the ancient gods of Greece. Now, there are going to be nights when you just stand up. There are going to be nights when you contemplate suicide. There are going to be nights where you just want to die, but you will have to try to give up on your life. You're going to be admitted to the psych ward 3 times, where you'll see naked people trying to find walls to climb. You're going to be rushed to the ER way too much, but these experiences are the reason you're going to grow up to be up. You're going to have dreams crashing down just because the pathetic adult didn't want you around. And you're going to have your heart break as if it were made of glass. And have no friends fall back on, let alone your lifetime's upper backs. You're going to wish you were normal, just like everybody else. But I need you to remember that you have a very bright future, even though you're going to go through hell. Russell, I need you to be prepared for a lot of obstacles you're going to face. And at times you're going to feel like you're back in the maze. And at times you're going to feel like you've been sort of base. And at times you're going to go doing crazy. Curse of the gods for why they made you this way. But Russell, I need you to listen. You might not be that good now, but we will be. Your life is going to seem like an utter disaster at times, but within you is the strength you need to succeed at being the best possible human being you can be. So keep your chin up. Keep your eyes on the prize. Because you'll far surpass everyone's expectations of what we can accomplish in our lives. But it won't be you or mine. Surprise. Thank you. So to get into the weeds a little bit about autism, right? To give you an analogy, to bring some visibility to this invisible disability of mine, I love using the computer analogy. Right? So I am the monitor, right? Back in the old days when we had the computers, we had the monitor up on the desk. The actual computer itself is like underneath the desk, right? We didn't see it really. Well, that computer is my brain, right? But me, my physical body, is what you interact with, i.e. the monitor. So that's me. Now, the computer is my autism, but a lot of people don't see that, right? They don't see the inner machinations and inner workings of my mind. And let's say my computer, that is my autism, let's say it runs on Microsoft Windows. Well, the external stimuli that is going into that computer is similar to being made for a Mac. It's not compatible with my system, right? It's going to take longer to process it. It's going to slow down the system. It might actually have to shut down to reboot. When our phones need an upgrade, we have to turn the phone off. That's what my meltdowns are. I literally upgrade. And I kid you not, like when I have a meltdown, which I have a handful a week, it's almost like a purging of all the difficulty of having to take in all the stimuli 24/7, but then I start anew and afresh. It's like I molt it. I shed a layer and I'm fresh. And then I'll have to molt again in a week. But it's very similar to rebooting your system when you have to upgrade your computer. And then dual diagnoses, which are very common, mental health conditions, very common comorbidities with autism. I have severe OCD. I have severe anxiety. I have severe depression. I have a lot of trauma I've accrued through my childhood. I have body dysmorphia. And I have intrusive thoughts. Now, those are all my dual diagnoses that I liken to viruses on the computer. So now when I'm taking in information that's not compatible with my system, now I have a bunch of viruses in the background too. And that ultimately leads to me short-circuiting, cracking, if you will. Right? Going haywire. That's when I sometimes will flee. On Christmas Day, I went to a restaurant with my mom. I was doing fine, but there were so many people in the restaurant that I was not expecting that I fled. I just ran out of the restaurant and I didn't know where the heck I was going. And that's scary because I'm not in control of my body when that happens, right? It's fight or flight mode. But that's because my system was overheating. And even I didn't know it until it was too late. Approximately 60% of autistics reported probable PTSD in their lifetime, compared to just 4.5% of the general population. Individuals with autism tend to be quite sensitive. That can be due to our hyper-awareness. And when you're sensitive, the more sensitive you are, this world is a brutal world. So the population of autistics accrues a lot more PTSD in their lifetime than the average population. And 78% of autistic children have another mental health condition. Okay. And it's important to treat the whole child, the whole individual, not just one diagnosis and then the other, but actually treat the person. Don't treat the autism, don't treat the OCD, treat the person, right?
holistic healthcare. But nobody sees that, right? Nobody sees that, right? All this is inside that head of mine. So this is what people see. They see me walking down the street. I bump into people in LA and they find out I have autism and they can't believe it because I'm functioning right there in the moment. But they don't see when I have to shut down and reboot. So people don't often see my autism. And when they do, they don't think it's autism. And what I mean by that is, when I have my meltdowns in public, it might be okay for a little kid with autism to have a meltdown, but God forbid the 33-year-old grown man has a meltdown in public, because I am seen as a threat, unfortunately. Because I will cry, I will sob, I will curl into a ball. I still headbang. I will hit my head as hard as I can. I will pound my chest as hard as I can. And when somebody sees that in public, they see that as threatening. I'm not allowed to have public meltdowns as an autistic adult, unfortunately. I've had very close calls with police in America because they see me crying, they see me hitting myself, and that's my autism being visible, but they don't think it's autism, they think it's a crazy person. So it's very difficult. It's very difficult. On my way to the hotel, when I landed at the airport and I was being driven to the hotel, I was sharing the ride share with another individual who just got picked up from the airport, and he asked why I'm in town. I said, I'm speaking at an autism conference. And he started talking about some autistic kids he knew back a long time ago, and he was talking about it because he said these individuals, and then he would go on to express his view of autism in a favorable light. But when I told him I had autism, he couldn't believe it. Again, usually I'm mistaken for a doctor at a conference, right? Because people don't see my autism, right? And so I said, well, I'm speaking at the autism conference because I have autism. And he was like, no way. And this was after he was telling me of all the autistic kids he's encountering, right? So my autism is invisible, but even when it is visible, it is often misunderstood. And I don't know which one is worse, to be honest. I would like to think, I get hurt when I'm misunderstood. So honestly, I just don't want people to see my autism at all. Because when they do see it, it can be misunderstood and hurt. So I always say that what we do not see is oftentimes more important than what we do see. But humans are visual creatures. We prioritize visual stimuli. You think about all your memories in life, a picture's going to come to your mind. Not necessarily a smell or sound, maybe, but not as vivid as the imagery. So what we see in front of us, our brains prioritize that visual stimulation, and it makes an examination of how to interact with that individual or whatever is happening in the environment. But what separates humans from animals is our ability to reason, is our will to reason, right? Use our intellect to realize that what we see in front of us is not all there is to see. And that oftentimes what we do not see is much more important than what we do see. So ask yourself, what am I not seeing here? Whether you're trying to help an individual have a meltdown, or whether you're navigating some incident in your current life, personal life, what are you not seeing here? Because the answers actually tend to lie in things that we cannot see, right? Whether that's hidden context, whether that's an invisible disability, whether that is an emotion causing the behavior. We only see the behavior. We don't see the emotion. We see a behavior manifesting from the emotion. So oftentimes, what we do not see is more important. So always ask yourself, be curious. Again, it's that curiosity. What am I not seeing here? So what is autism exactly? I get asked that question so many times, and honestly, I don't really know how to even answer that when it comes to my own lived experience. I obviously know technically what it is, developmental disorder, right, disability, communication disability, but for me, when it comes to autism, I don't know how to define my autism. I like to say autism for me is an exacerbation of the human condition. Like everything is just more. It's like very intense. It's very raw. It's very intimate. It's like life without a filter. It wears me down. It is exhausting. It is depleting. It's up close and personal. That is my autism. Right? But etymologically, what is actually composed within the word of autism? Well, it has two parts, ot and ism. Surprise there, right? What do those words mean? Ot is a Greek prefix stemming from autos, meaning self, and the suffix ism, also from Greek, implies a state of being or condition. So it's a state of self. I mean, at least that's how I interpret it. It's a state of self. You know, I have my own world that I like, and it's very difficult to go out into society, into an external world that is not made for people like me. And very few people take the time to come into my world, right? Society always expects me to become independent, to get that job, you know, to sustain myself, to have relationships. Well, a lot of that stuff requires, it puts the onus on me to come out of my state of self and enter the world that I get hurt out a lot by. I am an inwardly focused individual. And that is the literal meaning, etymologically, of autism. And I think it's important that we always look at what certain words actually, like why they are called what they are called, because we can use these words so often that they kind of become hollowed out and they kind of lose their meaning over time. We use them so much. You know, in Los Angeles, I gotta say, one of my pet peeves in Los Angeles, everybody, even if they don't know you, will like say I love you. Well, see, I love you, see you later. It's a very odd thing they do in Los Angeles. But if you go around telling everybody I love you, how's the person that you really love going to know when you say it to them, right? We're like using the word too much a little bit. And that can become, it's just natural, you know, it's supply and demand, right? You know, you have too much of something, you're going to start taking it for granted and inquiring less about it. So I think when we go back to etymology, that reminds us of the foundation of what that word encompasses. So I don't know if any of you are familiar with armadillos. Do you guys, are armadillos around here? Yeah, well, you guys familiar with them? I very much liken myself to an armadillo, right? I am an armadillo, right? Another analogy. That is me. That is me. And on a good day, on a very good day, you know, I feel like I'm an armadillo and I'm just kind of walking alongside of a highway in the desert and I'm just kind of, you know, feeling good about myself. You know, I'm doing this thing. I'm living life. I'm becoming independent. I can do it. But then a car zooms past me. And, you know, I get flustered and I curl into a ball. Like that. And that is exactly what happened at the beginning of this speech. Right? Because of the unexpected change, it shocked my system where I immediately entered my state of self. You know, when I started speaking, and I'm still trying to come out of that state of self right now. Because I very much want to just like go hide in my hotel room right now, right? And that is me. So it's like the stage of that an armadillo goes to. It's like, the change is happening. I'm gonna, you know, kind of close my body language down, feel a little bit more secure. But then, oh no, it's not going away. So I'm gonna curl a little bit more, and ultimately I'm gonna end up in just a ball. That is my state of self. Okay. And I curl into a ball when I get scared, or when things don't go according to plan. Or, you know, unexpected changes happen, or when I'm experiencing an intense emotion. I go from that very capable armadillo up there to a very non-functional armadillo who is simply in his own world trying to protect himself, right? And people oftentimes don't understand that juxtaposition. Like, Russell, you were just functioning, and now you're in your own world. Like, what is going on? A lot of people don't understand that, and that hurts as well. So again, brief timeline of my journey, just to add context to the story. This is what autism looks like for me, right? Again, like autism, I can't say this is what autism looks like because I can only talk about my own lived experience, right? I like to say the autism spectrum is just as wide as the human spectrum. It's incredibly varying existence and experience. So this is what autism looks like for me. Age 7, I really began experiencing meltdowns, which we did not know were meltdowns because I was not diagnosed with autism at that point. Panic attacks, depression, and severe phobias. I developed a severe speech impediment due to sucking my thumb. Age 9, these symptoms started to increasingly get worse. Continued to experience meltdowns, panic attacks, and severe phobias. And then OCD began to consume my livelihood. And I would get very disturbing, intrusive thoughts. OCD is one of the most, I think they rank it as the 5th most debilitating mental health disorder. And I call it an existential game of whack-a-mole because my OCD will morph. Like I will obsess and do rituals in one area of my life, but then when I get better and I can focus, I can obsess less about that area and calm it down a bit and have it in control, it pops up in another area of my life. It can manifest, it can adapt, it can morph, right? And so that makes it very difficult to get under control. And 70% of individuals with OCD are treatment resistant because of that adaptability, right? Once you have it controlled in one area of your life, it's going to morph into another area. And so it is very debilitating. And in America, at least, it's the only mental illness we still joke about. Society still allows it for some reason because most people don't know how debilitating it is. You know, people will make the remark, don't drink off my water, I'm a little OCD. You know, I keep a clean house, I'm a little OCD. And it's like no, like OCD is, God, if I can take a pill that cure OCD, I'll do it in a heartbeat. It is, along with the intrusive thoughts, and a lot of people don't even know about that, the rituals behind OCD. See, again, the visible part of OCD is the rituals, it's accounting, it's doing rituals and doing these things over and over. These odd behaviors are the visible part. But the reason behind those odd behaviors are the disturbing intrusive thoughts. And these intrusive thoughts that go on in the mind of an individual with OCD, which is very prevalent among the autism population, are debilitating. And they tend to be the complete opposite of who that individual is. So for instance, I'm a very nice, kind, sensitive guy. So a lot of my intrusive thoughts are very graphic, very violent. They're the complete opposite. It's an extraordinary disorder. I gotta tell you, OCD really knows where to hit you where it hurts the most. It knows the complete antithesis of who you are, and it puts that in your face, telling you you are this every day. And so that is why I tap 4 times, to get that thought out of my head. Not just because I feel tapping, I want to tap. I want to get the thought out of my head. But a lot of people don't see that invisibility aspect of OCD. So a few years later, my parents and I, we're struggling. We're taking me to all sorts of doctors. We're up in Seattle, Washington. You think they would have some pretty good doctors, but we're not getting any answers. And so at age 12, we ultimately had to admit me to a psych ward for 5 weeks because I was struggling so much with these symptoms. And those 5 weeks were very traumatic. There were many times when I would be waiting for my mom to come pay me, the visit. I would see her maybe twice a week. Here I am, 12 years old, struggling, suffering, and the hospital wouldn't let me see my mom every day. So she'd be allowed in. And then I would see her, and I would run towards her, and I would give her a hug, and I would start crying because I was happy to see her. But again, that happiness was not visible. What was visible was my crying when she arrived. And so the hospital staff tried to connect the dots. And they said, wait, before Mom got here, Russell was doing okay, but now Mom's here, Russell's crying. She might be enabling his behavior. So they would literally rip us apart in the middle of the hug. And here I am, just wanting my mom. I'm struggling so much, I'm not getting any help. I'm trying my best here. My parents are doing their best to try to get me help. My mom's coming to see me. I just want to give her a hug. And I start crying. They literally rip us apart. It was just day after day of things like that. And they told my mom to leave. And she's getting pushed out. She's mouthing, I'm sorry. That image is burned in my brain. It was a hallway very similar to this, where she was getting ushered out a door. And she's turning around at me, mouthing, I don't know what to do, Russell. Professionals discount the parents a lot, unfortunately. They really do, unfortunately. So every day was just just, again, lots of trauma accrued in those 5 weeks. And I ultimately was discharged, not because they, found a solution or anything, but because, I'd been there a while and they had a waiting list. They needed to let some people be discharged so they could make room for other people to try to get help there. Once I was discharged, I was ordered to attend public school without receiving any support or accommodations from the school district. At this point, I still did not yet have a diagnosis of autism. And so the very next day, after my discharge from the hospital, I went to my school. It wasn't easy. I didn't want to go. That was very much how I was, except I had a hood on, dressed head to toe in clothes, and I would have a meltdown when my mom was trying to get me to school. She didn't want to take me to school either because she knew how hard it was for me. I couldn't function at home, so how are they going to think I could function at school? But we were forced to do this. We were given no other option. Homeschooling was not an option at that point. My parents both worked, but my mom couldn't teach me at that point. So I would spend the entire day sleeping in the principal's office because they tried to put me in the classroom. They included me. But I didn't feel included by any means. And I was too scared to be around people my age, so I asked my mom to tell the teacher I wanted a desk by the door, the classroom door, away from the other kids, because I was afraid of people. I still am afraid of people, to be honest. But then other kids would come up to me, because again, I was very closed off. I was in my state of self at this age, 24/7. So here I was, with my hood on, I'm in a chair by the door, the rest of the kids are in a group, and when there was a break, the other kids would come up to me, and I would be staring at the ground, and they'd ask me, can you hear me? Like, they would almost treat me like a zoo animal, because I was not engaging with them. I was so terrified, and I was getting all these intrusive thoughts in my head, and I wanted to be home with my mom. And these kids would just come up to me and like, hello, is anybody there? And they're giggling to themselves. And I just had to detach, because it was just too painful. So that ultimately I got an accommodation, and that one accommodation was to sleep in to spend the day in the principal's office. I wanted that. I did not want to be included because it was not the best environment for me. So I enjoyed being by myself in the principal's office. At least I wasn't getting any fun of, and it wasn't as overstimulating. But I would fall asleep in the principal's office because I was exhausted. And then other teachers, administrators, office staff would walk by the principal's office, see this kid, me, sleeping in the principal's office with a pile of work in front of him that he hadn't done yet, and they immediately think, what did this student do to get in trouble? There was no continuity of the message as to why I was there with the teaching staff. So many teachers would see me and they'd wake me up and ask me what I did to get in trouble. And here I am just trying to get away from people because nobody was understanding. And honestly, it's not that hard. I like to think I've been very unlucky with all these just people totally just discounting me and not understanding, because I think it is pretty easy to look at somebody's eyes and see if they're struggling. The eyes tell a lot about somebody. But again, a lot of people didn't even take the time to look at my eyes or to try to enter my world. They just saw something and they reacted to it, pure and simple. Little do they know that has caused me so much heartbreak in my life. Right? So 6 months after that experience at school, just sleeping in the principal's office, I was finally diagnosed at the University of Washington's Autism Center at age 12 with autism. I'm going to do another spoken word poem, and this spoken word poem is kind of about those school days, right? Those school days of, just feeling discounted and left out. And it's titled, What Does It Feel Like to Not Be Heard? A penny for my thoughts? I'm the one who has to pay a cent. The cold year was what I bought all my pennies have instead. I have so much to say, but no one will hear. I'm
regarded as a reflection of Dracula in the mirror. I'm not there. So I just disappear into my mind, or at least my thoughts are sincere. What does it feel like to not be heard? It cuts deeper than the slur of any derogatory word. To be observed yet deferred only exacerbates the hurt. I deserve to be heard. Now I'm starting to sound absurd. I'm told that I'm lazy, that I want no part of school, that I'm acting a fool. This drives me crazy. All I need is some help, a friendly outreach of a hand. But the old hand knows how, because I no teacher even me. Thank you.
So it's been a difficult journey for me. But again, I like to talk about the unpleasant things because they give you, they help you become more grateful for the other side, the pleasant side of life, right? The cliche, joy wouldn't exist if it weren't for pain. That's very true. But I like to talk about, again, things that are not talked about because it doesn't have to be bad. Like, I'm not up here talking about, oh, look at everything that's happened to me, right? It's not, things didn't really happen to me. It's interesting. It's almost like I found my success not in spite of, but rather because of the struggle, right? Like if I didn't have autism, if I didn't have OCD, if I didn't go through these painful experiences, I wouldn't have this amazing career that I love. Right? If it wasn't for that, it wouldn't be for this. And so they go hand in hand. But to talk about inclusion very quickly, again, inclusion is a word we use a lot. We use that word a lot, and it can become redundant and hollowed out. So what is the actual definition of it? The practice or policy of including and integrating all people in groups and activities, organizations, political processes, etc., especially those who are disadvantaged, have suffered discrimination, or are living with disabilities. And the word that always stands out to me in that definition is the word practice. It is a practice. It's like the pursuit of happiness, the pursuit of inclusion. Happiness, we can maybe attain it here and there, but it's very fleeting. It's not going to be permanent. It's going to leave. Very similar to inclusion. There's no such thing as a fully inclusive environment, right? Things change rapidly. There's different aspects of the environment that may make the environment not inclusive or accessible. One kid can be too loud, right? If we're talking about a classroom. So there's no such thing as universal or fully inclusive. Now, as a concept, yes, and as an ideology, yes, and we can pursue that, but it's very fleeting, and you can't hold on to it. So we always have to practice it, right? You think about the best athletes in the world, or the best musicians in the world, the best anybody in the world. Do they just stop practicing it? No. So even when we have the most inclusive environment possible, at that time we still have to put in the work and practice new ways to make it better. And there's a lot of, shallow, there's a lot of makeshift framework in the United States where they talk about inclusion, but then you get there and you see it up close, and it's not inclusive at all, It's a term they use as just because of social accountability, because society is holding these institutions and these organizations and these schools to be inclusive. But unfortunately, that's not the way it is. There's a lot of good people doing a lot of good stuff out there. But there's also a lot of people who don't understand the gravity of how important this is. And now we have to try so hard. Because it's not given to us. And let's remember, inclusion is relative. What is inclusive for you may not be inclusive for someone else, whether by practice or definition, right? So according to the National Institute on Aging, the health risks of prolonged isolation, not being included, are equivalent to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Social isolation and loneliness have been estimated to shorten a person's lifespan by as many as 15 years. And these are like the byproducts of, not being included and being isolated. Now that I'm fully independent and I have the first time in my adult life and I have a personal life, I am having to jump over so many hurdles that I had accrued during my isolation. There's a reation that, solitary confinement is one of the worst punishments we give to people. Right? We're social creatures. We're not meant to be alone. And again, in my isolation, I wanted to be part of the outside world so much. But then when it wasn't happening and I kept getting rejected and dejected, I had to come up with some way to cope with that. And as an adolescent, with my brain still developing, I came up with the idea that, well, maybe I don't want the world. Maybe it's not the world who doesn't want me. Maybe I don't want the world. Maybe the world is bad. Maybe people are bad. And so I had to hold on to that in my isolation, just to cope with the situation. But now that I have a life, that is getting in the way. It makes it incredibly exhausting. Again, I am conditioned to think that people are bad. And I have to remind myself that people are bad. People are nice. People aren't scary. But it's because of that isolation, right? And those are byproducts of isolation that we very seldom talk about. Because our brains don't stop growing until we're around the age of 25, right? So let's always remember the byproducts. It's not just a situation. It's not just being lonely, right? This is long term. And it's so devastating that it can shorten a person's lifespan by as many as 15 years. That's the toll it can take on the nervous system. And education is hugely important. I have had so many things, kind of taken away from me in life, I never lived out my teenage years. Always wanted to, every weekend when I was 15, 16, 17, 18, I would just kind of go in my bedroom and cry, knowing other kids, knowing my sister was out having a good time, hanging out with friends, and I didn't have any, and even if I wanted friends, but I was just so too scared to meet anybody. So it was again, I'm often scared of what I desire most in this world. And that's tough to live with. I want a full life. I want friends. But I'm scared. I'm almost always scared. That's autism for me. It's, that fight or flight mode. So I feel I missed out on a lot, right? So I thought to myself, what's one thing that I can give myself that nobody can ever take away? And in my isolation, I thought a lot. I only had to, and I had no one else to get to know other than myself, right? So in my isolation, I did a lot of inward work and thinking, being introspective, and I realized knowledge. Knowledge is one thing I can give myself that nobody can ever take away. And I've always prided myself on that. Because nobody can ever take that away from me. And I gave it to myself, right? That's the best thing about knowledge, is we can give it to ourselves. We don't have to have a teacher. We can be our own teacher, right? There are other ways to learn, Oftentimes, teachers teach without realizing that they first have to learn how to teach in order to teach how to learn, right? So, honestly, dropping out of public school, I actually became more educated. Because I was free to explore what I enjoyed learning about, and I like to learn. I love learning. So there's a quote when it comes to autism that I really love. The quote is, "Autism took from me everything I ever wanted, but in turn it gave me everything I ever needed." And I love that quote. And it's probably because it's my quote. I made it up. So I feel pretty proud of myself. But it just sums up my autism very much. Yeah, it still continues to this day to take things away from me that I desperately want, right? But in lieu of that, it gave me everything I needed. Again, I found success through the struggle. And it's a very beautiful journey. It doesn't make it easy, doesn't make it enjoyable at times, but it makes it incredibly fulfilling and rewarding. So a theme of my accomplishments in life have been baby steps. Because I realized that, I've always had big goals in life. Always had big goals. But too often I would try to get those goals. I would shoot for the stars, so to speak, but I would completely miss and I would fall flat on my face. So I realized any big goal I have, if I can break it down into incremental, smaller goals, the chance of failure decreases, the chance of success increases, and doing those big steps, we build up and we accrue the self-confidence necessary to continue to go after our dreams and to achieve bigger things. Now, it takes a lot of patience. Baby steps are slow, A journey of 1,000 miles, starts with a single step, Confucius, right? But it's very efficient. And I cannot tell you how rewarding it is on a personal level to, look over my shoulder and realize how far those baby steps have taken me. I get impatient at times, sure. I'm 33. I've never really been in a real relationship before. I'm just now having friends for the first time. I want a family one day. I would love to get married. All that has taken an incredibly long time. But, if I break those big things down, I'll get there. It might not be as quickly as I wanted to. Might not go according to plan, which irritates my autism because I want everything to go according to plan. But it does work out, Maybe not the way I imagined, but it does work out. Abraham Lincoln, he once said, I walk slowly, but I never walk backwards. And again, even when I fall flat on my face, hey, I'm still moving forward, right? I'm not falling on my back, I'm falling on my face, I'm moving forward. So let's remember, again, everything is relative in life. One individual's most minute task can be another individual's greatest achievement. There are many days in LA where I will get stuck inside my house. I live alone, and I travel for work, so when I'm not traveling, I work from home, and that can be very isolating. I still don't have a lot of friends. I have one friend in LA that I can go to and see if he's pretty comfortable around, but other than that, I really don't have anybody that I'm not comfortable with yet to enter into my inner circle of people, if you will. So there are days when, say I'm really waking up, I'm very anxious, say I'm having an OCD flare-up, and there are a lot of intrusive thoughts going on in my head, and I can't get out of the house for the day. I get trapped in my house for days on end sometimes, 4 or 5 days, where I'm that armadillo curled into a ball. Right? Those are the days I wish I, still lived with my mom, because on those days she could help me get out. On days like that, she could go grocery shopping, right? I don't have anybody to do that for me, right? So sometimes I, have to order groceries online, have them delivered, or sometimes I just, have to get through it. But then, when those days end, after those 3-4 days of being stuck in my house end, and I take that first step outside the door, sometimes it's only that first step. Sometimes I just take one step outside the front door and then I close it and say that's a win. I couldn't do that the last 3 days, but I did it now. It's not where I'd like to be, but it's progress. And that means a huge amount. I have taken pictures. I think I've actually posted one on social media where my foot is outside of the door. It's the most, like that, those moments are the moments I live for. Those are my most powerful moments I'm most proud of. And I say that because with autism, I do excel at the extraordinary, yet struggle with the simple. Again, me. Yeah, I can do extraordinary things. That kind of comes easy. Everything in life is difficult. So if everything is difficult, why not go big or go home, right? The extraordinary things are just as difficult as the simple things. So, yeah, it seems like I can do the extraordinary things very well. And I can excel at that. But I really struggle with the simple. And so I am very high functioning when it comes to doing extraordinary things. But I can be very low functioning, not all the time, but on my difficult days, I can be very low functioning with the simple things. And let's realize that, have that broad perspective. Zoom out a bit and realize, again, what it says up top, that this might not seem like a big deal to you, but that's just to you, What about the individual it's affecting? Because sometimes there are times where you will get frustrated or mad, or you're just confused as to why maybe your kid with autism is crying over such a little thing. Well, it's because to them it's not little, right? It's relative. Right? And so to always remember the fluidity of the human condition. Things change. The only permanent thing in life is change. So always remember that, because, again, I get misunderstood a lot, from individuals who see me excel at the extraordinary. Then when they invite me out to hang out and I have a meltdown before and I can't go and have to cancel on them last minute, they're like, well, I guess he doesn't want to be friends. And then I lose out on an opportunity to make a new friend, right? They see me, traveling the world, but they don't understand what a meltdown is, because they don't see it, again, right? So how can you support individuals with disabilities? Invisible disabilities, autism, anybody. How can you just support anybody? And, the number one thing for me is when I'm struggling, I would like more people to read my body language, right? The eyes tell a story, the body tells a story. If I'm curled up like an armadillo in that ball, that is probably telling you I am afraid, right? If I'm rubbing my hands, it's probably telling you I'm nervous. If I'm pacing back and forth on the stage here, probably telling you I'm a little nervous too, right? And I am. The body tells a story. But again, for some reason, a lot of people will just see a behavior and react without studying it and asking, what is this behavior telling me? Right? We just see the behavior and say, oh, let's stop that behavior. But what is the story? It's a story. Let's learn about it. Let's be curious. Regular check-ins always help. When somebody's with me and they check in with me, even if it's like every half hour, they shoot me a text. How are you doing? Anything you need? That helps me a lot. Because I know I can reach out to somebody when that time comes. I might not need your help now, but thank you for asking, because I might need it later, and now I feel comfortable enough. I can trust you because you reached out to me first. I can now trust you to reach out to you and feel comfortable. Again, they are knocking on the door to my world. That state of self, when people make inquiries, how are you doing? They're basically knocking on the door to my world. And that is appreciated very much. I might not open the door, but it doesn't mean I don't really appreciate the inquiry into my world. And it doesn't mean to stop knocking on my door just because I didn't open it, right? I have to get comfortable. Maybe next time I'll let you take one step into my world, right? Again, let's not take behavior at face value. It is a byproduct of an emotion, and an emotion is typically a byproduct of a thought. Again, take every opportunity to enter the individual's world, and lastly, be kind. Yeah. Simplest actions often mean the most. Little things like people just giving me a smile on the day I'm struggling. I hold on to that. Those simple things. Again, regular check-ins. How are you doing, Russell? It's showing me that individual cares about me, and that means a lot. They're simple, they are, but again, remember, I struggle with the simple. So the simple is not simple for me. It's powerful. The simplest actions mean the most to me, especially when I'm struggling. And then if you need to talk to an individual, whatever their communication capability might be, when we are talking about certain issues, there's a lot of vulnerable topics that come up, in our journeys with autism. And there's a delicate balance of how to go about initiating that vulnerable dialogue. For me, again, when I'm struggling, if I'm having a meltdown and people need to, ask me what's going on, or can I help you if they're knocking on the door to my world, I would like them to ask as easy yes or no questions to start, because I don't have to verbalize anything, right? When I shut down, I really can't talk. But I can give a thumbs up or thumbs down. I can give a head nod or a head shake, right? So easy yes or no questions where I don't have to say anything, but I can still answer. Again, if we expect individuals to tell us what they are struggling with in that moment, why should we expect them to open up to us if we haven't opened up to them, right? Communication is a two-way street. It's an exchange. So if you want to gain somebody's trust, maybe share vulnerability of yours first to foster a connection, right? You can just say, hey, the other day I was really struggling. I didn't know what to do. I was beating myself up. But you know what I did? I went out for a nice walk, and it helped me, gain a new perspective. But I really struggled that day. And so that lets the person know that you're trusting them, and okay, maybe then they can trust you. And you don't have to do anything, right? Don't take action. Simply listen. There's an ancient quote that says, we were born with 2 ears but 1 tongue, because we were meant to listen twice as much as we speak. Prove your genuine interest by repeating important details mentioned when the individual is speaking, talking, or communicating, however they communicate. If they're saying something that interests them, when it's your turn to talk, repeat it so they know you're listening and that you understand how important that thing is to them. And then reduction-focused inquiries. And by that I mean basically asking yourself, not so much the individual, why? You know, for instance, why am I having a meltdown? Well, it's because of this. You know, the unexpected change. Okay, well, why did that unexpected change make you have a meltdown? Well, it's because, again, it didn't line up with my portrait. Well, why didn't it line up with my portrait? You can just kind of keep asking why and you get further to the root of the issue at hand, right? And when it comes to helping and supporting, I mean, they're two drastically different concepts. And I think this is very important because a lot of people will try to help me when they do not know how to help me. And I will use my beautiful, lovely sister as an example. She's never really understood me. She tries, but she doesn't really understand me. So we went on a vacation a few years ago. And the first day on vacation, I was overstimulated. We were supposed to go hiking and kayaking, and I didn't have it in me to do anything that day. And I remember we were renting an Airbnb, we were renting a house, and I was sitting downstairs in the corner, kind of in my state of self, curled up, knees against my chest, and I told her, Erin, I don't think I'm going to be able to go today. And she got frustrated, you know. Again, she was like, Russell, why? Like, why can't you go? This is our trip, we planned for this. And I told her, just like, I'm exhausted, you know, this trip was exhausting getting here, I'm overstimulated, and I just can't go out into the external world right now. It's too much for my system to handle. And she said, okay, well, Russell, at least go outside and get some sun. Make yourself feel better. Like, don't just sit in here and wallow in your despair. Go outside and get some sun. But she does not know that going outside in that moment for me is too much. Like, that is the reason I'm not going out, because in my moments of struggle, when I'm that armadillo in that ball, I feel very vulnerable. I am protecting myself. Oftentimes, I feel like I'm a little rabbit that is surrounded by a pack of wolves. That's why I curl into a ball during my meltdowns. That's why I was curled into the corner when my sister saw me. She did not know that going outside, being in an open space where I'm more physically vulnerable, would actually make me worse. So when she suggested that, I was in an awkward position now between either saying, okay, Erin, I will do that, and then go and do it, but to my own detriment, or saying, Erin, that doesn't work for me. And then she'd get offended. Right? Because she tried to help, without really knowing how to help. And it put me in a very awkward position. And that can happen a lot. So how do we break that down? Helping. Helping is first being aware that we can help, and then also knowing when to help. Timing is vital too. It's active, you know, it's overt, it's explicit. Helping is active. It consists of encouragement, compassionate guidance, and again, actionable and pragmatic practices. Supporting, well, when you don't know how to help, you can support. It's okay not to know how to help. You can support. Support is being aware that we don't know how to help. It's much more passive. Consists of compassion, sincere listening, validating, includes asking what may help with simple yes or no questions. It's okay if you don't know how to help.